But what he's dealing with in that sense is a lot of a priori truths, that is to say, universal and necessarily true in that sense. To contradict them is self-contradictory. So to say we learn them by experience is irrelevant. You follow?
The only other thing was, it seems like this is the thing that makes me emotionally, in a sense, not like this.
Yeah, I don't like it emotionally either. I always say to myself when we get to Spinoza, oh, Spinoza, you know.
Well, yeah, and it's just
I'd rather have Descartes, even Leibniz, but Spinoza. Do I have to wade through Spinoza again? Yes, Holmes, you do.
Well, it's just that it seems like it's such a dead philosophy almost, in a sense. And that, well, you know, he was talking about how it promotes a purposelessness.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a really strict...
No, I don't think it promotes a purposelessness. No, don't say nasty things about Calvinism. All you're doing is expressing confused ideas. Where were we? No, I know what you're saying. Seems irrelevant. What's the point? Seems dead. Abstruse. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are abstruse. Mathematics is. But are you going to turn your back on mathematics? It can be abstruse, but tremendously valuable and useful. You see? And he's not saying, oh, this is the only way you can ever get to know these conclusions. No, he's simply trying to show that it's demonstrable in what was understood then as a scientific fashion. Well, if you don't want to understand the scientific thinking of the 17th century, you're confused about other things. But I agree, it's not exactly the sort of stuff I like to read late at night when I want to relax. No, I don't take Spinoza on vacation with me. No. No, I had a grad school professor who took Kant's Critique of Pure Reason with him in the military in World War I and carried it in his hip pocket in the infantry across Europe. I presume he got it out once in a while, too. Some people would. But believe me, well, I'd rather do it with Kant than with Spinoza. But incidentally, if you were a hostage for 7 years and you had Spinoza with you, you would survive 7 years as a hostage much better than if you had a bunch of comic papers with you. Those guys are saying now they're out. What their minds were filled with in the past is what sustained them. You see? Yeah.
It'd take that long to figure it out anyway.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. 7 years, it would take me to work through all those proofs. Yeah. Yeah, but there are people who thrive on this. A friend of mine, Alan Donegan, who taught at Caltech and died just about a year ago. Very fine philosopher, became a Christian about 15 years ago. I mean, the last book he wrote was on Spinoza. And I want to get a hold of it and read it and see what he did with Spinoza. But he was enthusiastic about Spinoza. Oh, admittedly, he had one of those iron trap minds, but yeah, that's speaking about psychological reasons for being interested in Spinoza, and you were having psychological reasons for not being interested in Spinoza. If you had a steel trap mind, maybe you would be interested in Spinoza. So forth. But obviously there are Spinoza fans like there's the opposite. Incidentally, I'm glad we get into this debate, because I was planning next time, this sort of reaction always sets in this, at this juncture in the course. I was planning next time to say something about the significance and purpose of this kind of metaphysical exploration. So you're saving me a lot of effort in doing this. Because if you say it, it's much, you get it out in this sort of discussion, it's much more effective than if I just spout a few lines about it. Ruth?
Not to be claiming to have a steel trap mind by any means, but I really enjoyed reading Spinoza. And I guess the fascinating thing to me were all the connections to Eastern thinking.
Yes, yes.
And it made me wonder a lot about some of the Eastern influences in Jewish thinking, how much that may or may not have influenced him, or whether it was coming out of, I've heard in terms of writings about Jewish logic, Hebrew logic, the whole concept of block logic, where there's a lot more comfort with the kind of paradoxes that we, being so trained in the Greek thinking, are uncomfortable with. And I don't know, I just thought it was really fascinating, and it added a whole other light to ways of approaching sort of life than others.
Yeah, keep in mind the sort of thing I said when we were getting into Spinoza, that if you want a paradigm case of a pantheistic philosophy, this is the one that's most meticulously worked out, you see. Not that all pantheists use this kind of scientific method. Certainly Eastern pantheism doesn't seem to. But the value, beyond the historical value and influence and so forth, in looking at Spinoza is to see just what is entailed in pantheism. And I take it from the things you're bucking against, like his determinism, that you're getting the point of what's entailed in pantheism. You see, it's coming across. Yeah. The Eastern pantheist influence is more evident in 19th century monistic metaphysics than it is here.
There's a point that he makes about, insofar as men live in obedience to reason, they always agree. And then he goes on to say that men who agree, who are in obedience to reason, they're only useful to one another, implying that I suppose those who are not reasonable men are useful, or are useless. Has that been taken by anybody to support, I don't know, tyrannical ideas?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because he is such an advocate of the rule of reason, you see, that tyranny, which plays to the emotions and springs from passionate emotion, is going to be about the last thing that he would want. Yeah. Well, since you shot my lecture for the day, which is fine, they deserve shooting sometimes. Not the lecturer, just the lecture. Let me see if I can capture what I had planned to say about this kind of metaphysical system and just sum it up in that way. We'll build on this as we get into Leibniz. These three, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, are the three great rationalists epistemologically, a priori knowledge. The three great rationalists of the history of Western thought. Interpreting the world in accordance with certain a priori conceptions that come out in his definitions. Yeah. Theirs is what is sometimes called a speculative metaphysic, where the term speculative, keep in mind, does not refer to wild-eyed speculations, that would be imagination, but refers rather to seeing with the mind's eye, clearly and distinctly. You see, speculative metaphysics. Now, and this is part of what you're seeing, I think, that kind of speculative metaphysic, developing a picture of reality, tends to generate problems about the relationship of appearance to reality. The relationship of appearance to reality. Spinoza says, this is the way it is, and you say, yes, but, you know, and I have to stand on my head to answer it for Spinoza. You say, what your appearances are in reality. About appearances, we have only confused ideas. Now, what is it that gives rise to this kind of speculative metaphysic which creates such a tension between appearance and reality? And the thing underlying it is the problems they have with the world of appearances. The problems with the world of their experience. You see? The world of their experience. Vacuum of knowledge. A vacuum of authority. You see? Growing conflicts between science and religion. That's more evident in Leibniz. It'll come. You see. So what they're trying to do is to handle the problems in their world of experience, you see, by appealing to certain universal and necessary truths. Now, there's a contemporary of these people who's a jurist, jurisprudence, Hugo Grotius, a Dutch thinker, time of the 100 Years' War, religious war, Catholic versus Protestant, ravaging Europe, you see. And there were religious conflicts throughout Europe in the post-Reformation period. What about England? And the religious conflicts that underlay the English Civil War in Thomas Hobbes' time, you see. And in Europe, likewise. What Grotius did was to look for some universal and necessary basis for law, for laws that will govern and limit the practice of war. Universal and necessary rather than partisan. You see, not a sectarian view, but something that is universally binding. You see. Well, it's, you know, like the East-West conflict of the last 40 years. What was the only hope of reaching any agreement and avoiding war? Well, what we've had to do for 40 years was to find something on which there can be universal agreement. And if you can't reach any agreement. The only point about universal agreement seemed to be survival. We want to survive.